Hello, Woodrow Wilson friends and family. This is Miss Fields here, and I am joining you for another episode of Math Toolbox. We are currently on our third episode, and today we are going to be learning and reviewing how to describe numbers. So in our past instructional week, our fifth graders learned 4 different ways to describe numbers. Now, this skill is something that we are going to use for the rest of the year. We first learned this skill using whole numbers. However, in the future, we are also going to be using this skill to describe decimals as well. There are 4 ways that we are going to be describing decimals and whole numbers for the rest of the year, and that includes standard form, written form, expanded form, and expanded notation with exponents. The first way to describe a number is called standard form, and this is the most common way that people represent numbers. In this form, numbers are always expressed as numbers, and this form is also called base 10 numeral form. So fifth graders, if you encounter a problem that asks you to describe a number in base 10 numeral form or in standard form, just know that those two forms are synonyms. The second way that we learned how to describe numbers this week is called written form. And just like the title says, you are simply writing numbers with words. All numbers are expressed as words with written form. And my recommendation for fifth graders is that it's easiest to have written form sort itself out when you just say the number out loud. What I do when I'm writing down written form is I say the number out loud and I write down individually each number that I say. The third way that we learned how to describe numbers this week is called expanded form. In expanded form, rather than numbers being represented as just numbers or as words, numbers are represented with multiplication expressions. And you can see that up here with our 5 times 10,000. This is a multiplication expression. Something else that's important to note about expanded form is that there's always going to be an addition sign to connect each of these multiplication expressions so that you know that these numbers are all together to form one number. My recommendation for writing down expanded form is that you first write down the individual digits, 5, 9, 8, 2, and then multiply them by their place value, the 10,000s place, the 1,000s place, 100s place, 10s place, or 1s place. Last but not least, we have expanded notation with exponents. Now this is the last way that we learned how to describe numbers, and this form is very similar to expanded form. Numbers are represented with multiplication expressions. Each expression is connected with an addition sign to indicate that this is all one expression that should be added together to find out what the number is. But something that makes it different than just expanded form is that each of these digits is multiplied by an exponent. And we'll learn what that means in the upcoming slides. So for our number here, we're going to describe it using the 4 ways that I previously mentioned. But I want to kind of give fifth graders some tips on what to do when they encounter a number, and also the best way to attack describing a number. So whenever I encounter a problem that asks me to describe a number, my first thought that's going through my brain is identifying what the number's form currently is. So in looking at this number, it looks like it's 1,942. My first step is I am going to decide what form it is in. So I'm seeing that there's numbers, I'm seeing that there's a comma, I'm not seeing that there's any words or there's any exponents. So my background knowledge leads me to believe that the number I'm looking at is currently in standard form or base 10 numeral form. That being said, that's just one way that we can describe this number. I know in my mind that I need to describe it 3 other ways. The next way that I'm going to describe it is using written form. So like I said before, one way that you can describe a number using the way that you can describe a number using written form is best done by saying the number out loud. So I'm already hearing some kids in my mind saying, "But Ms. Fields, I struggle with saying words out loud. It's confusing me." No problem. I've got the solution for you. So if you struggle with saying words out loud because maybe you struggle with your place value, don't fret. I've got a resource for you. On Google, if you look up Google Translate, it gives you a search icon right here. So what you need to do next is you need to type in your number and click the speaker. As soon as you click the speaker, a computer-like voice is going to read the word, or excuse me, not the word, the number out loud for you. So like I said before, my recommendation for kids who are trying to find out written form is to say it out loud. Well, you've got the computer saying it out loud for you. So what you need to do next is just simply write down the numbers that the computer is saying. If I were to do that exactly as the computer said, I would have written down 1,942. Now, in reflecting back, I have my number in standard form. I have my number in written form. My next step in my brain would be thinking ahead to writing my number in expanded form. Like I said before, expanded form is a little bit more complex than written form or base 10 numeral or standard form. So I'm going to give you a couple steps that you can take in order to be successful every time that you're expected to write a number in expanded form. So the first step that I recommend for 5th graders is to isolate the digits. What do I mean by isolate? I mean identify each digit that is in the number. So as a whole, this number is 1,942, but individually, I've got a digit 1, I've got a digit 9, a digit 4, and a digit 2. My next step would be to write down each of these digits in an expression with a multiplication sign, with parentheses, and all connected using the addition sign. Because remember, all of these numbers are together. They're representing one number. However, we're just representing it in an expanded way to show the place value of each digit. My next step would be to add in the place value to those multiplication expressions. Again, some 5th graders struggle with their place value. That's okay. I've got resources for you to help you be successful until you finally master that. So, pretending that I don't know my place value yet is something I struggle with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look up a place value chart, and I'm going to put each of the digits in the corresponding place value. So I put my 1 in the thousands place, my 9 in the hundreds place, my 4 in the tens place, and my 2 in the ones place. My next step would be to write down each of these place values into the expression that I mentioned previously. Let's see what that looks like. I've got my 1 times 1,000 because this is in the thousands place. I've got my 9 times 100 because the 9 is in the hundreds place. I put my 4 times 10 because my 4 is in the tens place. And then I put my 2 times 1 because the 2 is in the ones place. One recommendation that I have for 5th graders that are maybe a little bit shaky on expanded form is I recommend that if you're unsure, to multiply these numbers together to get 1,940 and 2 and add them all together. If you see that your sum does not equal the number that you have in standard form, go back and repeat the steps to make sure you do it right. Now, in reflecting on the ways that we can describe the numbers, I see that I've described my number in standard form, I've described it in written form, and I've also described it in expanded form. My last way that I'm going to be describing my number is expanded notation with exponents. So something important to know that with expanded notation with exponents is that it really goes hand in hand with expanded form. So when you're describing a number, make sure that you use expanded form first to set you up for success in representing the number using expanded notation with exponents. So the first step that I recommend when you're changing a number into expanded form with exponents is that you change the place values to a base of 10. So what I mean by that is I have my number in expanded form here. I'm copying everything down from my expanded form down here except for the place values. Each of the place values I change to have a base of 10 because the exponents are special because you are going to be simplifying the place value to just be a base of 10 with an exponent power to the top right. From there, so as I was saying before, each of the place values can be simplified into an exponent. So in looking at my expanded notation with exponents, you're probably wondering where these numbers in the top right corner came from. So if you look up here to each of the corresponding place values, we've got 1,000 represented as 10 to the third power, 100 represented as 10 to the second power, and 10 represented as 10 to the first power. You can figure out what the exponent is by counting up each of the zeros. So if you count up the zeros in 1,000, you've got 1, 2, 3 zeros. You can represent that as 10 to the third power. Or it's the same as 10 times 10 times 10. Same for 100. Count up the zeros, 1, 2. That's going to be your exponent, 10 to the second power. And for the 10, it's a little bit different because there's only one zero. So all you need to do is put 10 to the first power, and that represents the same as 10. Now looking over to our ones place, we know that this is not the tens place, so there's not going to be an exponent that you need to put a power of 10. So in reviewing, we see that we've represented our number in 4 ways. We have our standard form, which is just numbers. We've got our written form, which is words. We've got our expanded form, which separates our place values from our digits. And we've also got our expanded form using exponents. So like I said before, describing numbers is a skill that we're going to be using in 5th grade for the rest of the year. We'll be using it to describe whole numbers, and we'll also be using it to describe decimals as well. So it's a skill that is in need to practice and to never forget because it's going to set you up for success. Thanks again, guys, for joining me, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow morning.